At least 2 people were killed when torrential rain caused widespread flooding around the city of Catania.
Oh my god.
Europe is about to face one of the most dramatic weather weeks in recent memory, and what's happening right now could affect millions of people across the continent. A massive storm system is currently spinning over the Mediterranean, but here's where it gets really interesting. This isn't just your typical winter storm. What meteorologists are seeing in the atmospheric patterns is something that could reshape weather conditions from Portugal to the Balkans, from Iceland to Greece, all within the next 7 days. Storm Harry is currently unleashing its fury across the Mediterranean, but the real story isn't just about one storm. It's about a complete atmospheric upheaval that's creating a domino effect of extreme weather events. Right now, as we speak, rain totals are reaching dangerous levels in areas that rarely see this kind of intensity. Some regions are bracing for over 20 centimeters of rain. That's nearly 8 inches of water falling from the sky in a matter of days. But rain is only part of this unfolding weather drama. The jet stream has taken an unusual dive southward, creating what meteorologists call a southern storm track. This atmospheric river is funneling moisture and energy directly into the Mediterranean basin, but it's also doing something unexpected. Parts of this energy are breaking off and lifting northward, creating a secondary zone of chaos that's affecting Ireland, the United Kingdom, and even reaching as far north as Iceland. This split personality of the storm system means that while southern Europe battles flooding rains, northern regions are dealing with their own set of challenges. Let's start with what's happening right now in the Mediterranean. Storm Harry is positioned perfectly to create maximum impact. The system is drawing moisture from the sea and hurling it against the mountainous terrain of Italy, Corsica, and Sardinia. When warm, moist air hits these elevated regions, it's forced upward rapidly, cooling and condensing into torrential rainfall. Palermo and parts of Sardinia are already seeing the beginning of what could be catastrophic flooding. The red zones on weather maps aren't just numbers, they represent communities that could be cut off, homes that could be flooded, and lives that could be disrupted. But here's where the story takes an even more dramatic turn. As this moisture-laden air pushes northward into the Alps and Pyrenees, it's encountering much colder temperatures. What falls as rain in the valleys transforms into heavy snow at elevation. We're talking about potential accumulations of 40 to 50 centimeters in some Alpine regions. That's enough snow to bury a small car, and it's coming down fast. Andorra, already dealing with winter tourism season, could see both heavy rain in lower elevations and massive snow dumps in the ski areas, a combination that creates avalanche risks and travel nightmares. The timing of this storm couldn't be more challenging. As Harry continues its march across the Mediterranean through Tuesday, it's not weakening as typical storms do. Instead, it's maintaining its strength and even showing signs of intensification in certain areas. Barcelona and the eastern coast of Spain are next in line for heavy rainfall, with the Balearic Islands potentially seeing some of the worst conditions. Malta, often spared from extreme weather, finds itself on the edge of this system with uncertainty about whether it will escape the worst or be pulled into the storm's outer bands. What makes this situation particularly dangerous is the persistence of the pattern. This isn't a quick-moving system that will blow through in a day or two. The atmospheric setup is locked in place, meaning wave after wave of moisture and energy will continue pounding the same regions. By Wednesday, as Harry begins to shift eastward toward Greece and the Balkans, a new low-pressure system is already forming off the coast of Portugal. This relentless parade of storms is what turns manageable weather into potential disasters. Greece and Albania are preparing for their turn in the spotlight by midweek. The mountainous terrain of these countries creates its own weather complications. As the storm system approaches, it will tap into moisture from both the Mediterranean and the Adriatic seas. This double moisture source, combined with the orographic lifting caused by the mountains, could produce extraordinary snowfall totals in elevated areas. We're potentially looking at 20 centimeters or more of snow in regions that are crucial for transportation between the Balkans and the rest of Europe. Meanwhile, that piece of energy lifting northward is creating its own storyline. Ireland and the United Kingdom are facing a week of persistent cold rain. This isn't the dramatic, intense rainfall of the Mediterranean, but rather a steady, grinding precipitation that saturates the ground and overwhelms drainage systems. Wales and Western England are particularly vulnerable, with their hilly terrain channeling water into valleys where many communities are located. Scotland's highlands could see this precipitation fall as snow, adding another layer of complexity to an already challenging situation. Iceland represents perhaps the most unusual aspect of this weather pattern. Typically, Iceland sees its share of winter storms, but the current setup is funneling an unusual amount of moisture and energy toward the island nation. The interaction between the relatively warm Atlantic waters and the cold Arctic air mass creates a volatile mix. Reykjavik and coastal areas are looking at days of rain and wind, while inland areas could see significant snow accumulations. But here's what's really fascinating about this entire setup. There are notable gaps in this storm parade. Poland, Germany, and much of Central Europe find themselves in a relative dead zone. While storms rage to the north and south, these regions are experiencing unusually quiet conditions. It's as if nature has drawn boundaries, saying storms are allowed here and here, but not in between. This isn't necessarily good news for these areas, as they may be dealing with stagnant air conditions and potential fog issues, but they're certainly avoiding the extreme precipitation affecting their neighbors. As we move through Thursday and Friday, the pattern shows no signs of breaking down. In fact, there's potential for another named storm system to develop in the Atlantic. The conditions are ripe: warm sea surface temperatures, favorable upper-level dynamics, and plenty of available moisture. If this system develops, it would continue the assault on Western Europe, particularly affecting Portugal, Spain, and France. The cumulative effect of multiple storms hitting the same regions raises the specter of significant flooding, landslides, and infrastructure damage. The Alpine regions face a particular challenge with this setup. The combination of heavy snow at elevation and rain at lower levels creates unstable snowpack conditions. Avalanche risks will be elevated throughout the week, affecting not just ski resorts but also transportation corridors and mountain communities. Switzerland, Austria, and northern Italy need to prepare for potentially dangerous conditions that could persist well into next week. Turkey and Cyprus, often overlooked in European weather discussions, won't escape this pattern either. By Thursday and Friday, the eastern Mediterranean will see its share of active weather. The mountainous terrain of Turkey creates its own microclimate effects, potentially leading to heavy snow in eastern regions while coastal areas deal with flooding rains. Cyprus, surrounded by warm waters, could see particularly intense rainfall as storms tap into that maritime moisture. What makes this entire scenario even more complex is the temperature gradient across the continent. While southern regions deal with relatively mild temperatures and rain, northern areas are cold enough for snow. This temperature contrast actually feeds the storm systems, providing the energy needed to maintain their intensity. It's a self-reinforcing cycle that won't break until the larger atmospheric pattern shifts. The human impact of this weather pattern cannot be overstated. Transportation networks across Europe will be severely tested. Mountain passes may become impassable, flights will likely face delays and cancellations, and maritime operations in the Mediterranean could be suspended. Emergency services in multiple countries are preparing for what could be a week of continuous operations, from water rescues in flood zones to avalanche responses in mountain areas. Looking at the bigger picture, this weather pattern represents what meteorologists are increasingly seeing: more persistent, more intense storm systems that lock into place and pummel regions for extended periods. The old rules about quick-moving winter storms are being rewritten. Communities that have dealt with flooding once in a generation might see multiple events in a single week. As we track this evolving situation, several key points emerge. First, the Mediterranean region faces immediate and severe flooding threats, particularly in areas with mountainous terrain. Second, the Alps and Pyrenees will see dangerous snow accumulations that could trigger avalanches. Third, Northern Europe, including the British Isles and Iceland, faces a prolonged period of cold, wet conditions. Fourth, the pattern shows signs of persistence, with new storms developing to continue the onslaught. And finally, there are signs that another named storm could develop, adding yet another chapter to this remarkable weather story. For those in affected areas, preparation is crucial. This isn't a time for complacency. The combination of heavy rain, snow, and persistent patterns means that conditions could deteriorate rapidly. Stay informed, have emergency supplies ready, and be prepared for disruptions to daily life. The weather over the next week will test infrastructure, emergency services, and community resilience across much of Europe. That's it for today, folks. See you in the next video.